On a crisp autumn morning, Emily Harper knelt to tie her shoelace on the dew-tipped grass of her front lawn unaware that two patrol officers were stealthily closing in, hands hovering over their holsters. "Ma'am, step away and keep your hands visible," barked one officer, his voice tight with suspicion. Emily, dressed in worn joggers and a hoodie, blinked half amused, half confused. Her legally holstered sidearm was snug against her hip, not hidden, but not flaunted either. She was on her own lawn, off duty, enjoying her morning. One officer nervously muttered into his radio, "Suspect is armed female, possible threat. Neighborhood complaint." But then, sunlight hit something on her waistband, a badge. The mood shifted in an instant. "You're Chief Harper. Chief Emily Harper." The second officer stammered, pale as a ghost. Across the street, Margaret Voss, HOA president and self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac, clutched her yapping terrier. And her phone, still mid-whisper, a smug grin glued to her face. She thought she had just engineered a moment of neighborhood glory. Instead, she had just stepped on a legal landmine. She had no idea the armed threat she'd falsely reported was the city's new police chief, and her stunt had just crossed into criminal territory. But this wasn't a random misunderstanding. It was the latest blow in a quiet war Margaret had been waging. Re-elected HOA's president for a third term thanks to a suspiciously low voter turnout and her signature mandatory potluck, Margaret ruled the neighborhood with cold precision. Fines flew like confetti. $25 for imperfect lawns, $50 for sidewalk chalk, $100 for lingering Christmas lights. And lately, she was obsessed with visible firearms, declaring them a menace to community peace despite state laws that allowed open carry. Emily's calm presence, especially after last year's rash of burglaries, reassured neighbors. But to Margaret, the sight of a holster wasn't lawful protection, was rebellion. Just 2 days before the 911 stunt, Margaret had marched onto Emily's property uninvited, demanding she remove her weapon or face a $500 daily fine. "You're supposed to set an example," she snapped. "I am," Emily replied coolly. "One that follows the law, not your fantasy." Margaret, flustered and defeated, vowed, "I'll handle this." And she did by falsely calling 911. But that morning, as the officers sheepishly apologized, realizing who they were, confronting a meal, simply nodded. "You did your job," she said. "Now I'll do mine." When Emily approached Margaret, still gloating across the street, her tone was calm but razor-sharp. "You filed a false police report. That's a crime, Margaret." "I didn't know it was you," Margaret squeaked. "You weren't in uniform." "That's exactly why you don't call in threats without proof," Emily replied. "You put everyone at risk." That night, 6 neighbors showed up at Emily's door with brownies, a pie, and a quiet offer. "We saw everything. She's unhinged. How can we help?" Support was building. And Margaret, she was just getting started. The next day, Margaret sent out a newsletter accusing Emily of brandishing a weapon and creating fear. She hinted that Emily was abusing her power. Emily didn't respond with anger. She responded with evidence. She submitted the 911 transcript, her body cam footage, and a harassment report to the city attorney in a closed-door city council meeting. Emily exposed Margaret's antics, anonymous letters urging residents to report troublemakers, an HOA rulebook she'd written herself, and fines issued without a board vote. One councilman muttered, "I thought HOAs were about lawns, not authoritarian regimes." But Margaret didn't back down. She called an emergency HOA meeting to propose a neighborhood weapons ban, citing her own false 911 call as justification. But the room turned on her. "You lied," said Tom, a quiet retiree. "You endangered our police chief and us. You should be removed." She tried to laugh it off, but her own vice president had stopped smiling. Soon after, Sue went to the media trying to smear Emily. But the reporter's son had once been saved by Emily during a fire. The hit piece never ran. At a public safety forum, Emily played the 911 audio aloud. Margaret's panicked voice calling her a dangerous threat filled the room. Screens showed her inflammatory newsletter. The mayor was stunned. A citywide HOA audit was ordered. Then the real collapse began. HOA Vice President David Chin admitted Margaret had been issuing fines solo for years. He resigned and submitted a sworn statement. Margaret sent another newsletter claiming to be a victim. But this time, residents didn't believe her. They were furious. She lied to the police. She slandered our chief. She's a threat. One woman shouted, "The board moved fast. Vote of no confidence. 28 to remove. 2 to keep. 1 abstain." She was out. What followed was an unraveling. Investigators found $75,000 missing. A shell security firm. Chat logs of her mocking Emily and planning the smear campaign. Her defamation lawsuit dismissed. A judge nearly sanctioned her for filing it. Then came the megaphone rant at a block BBQ, ranting about deep state. Drones. She had to be escorted away. Even her own dog seemed embarrassed. Emily documented every threat, every email Levin, those from Margaret's ex, a former HOA treasurer. A restraining order followed, but Emily didn't crumble. She trained her officers on false reporting and HOA abuse. She spoke at town halls. Her story spread a model of how to beat corruption with grace and proof. Margaret's house, foreclosed. Her storage unit, full of creepy HOA surveillance logs, drones, and spreadsheets labeling neighborhood kids as emerging threats. Final act. A podcast blaming it all on Chief Harper's deep state agenda. But her uncut rant was leaked by one of Emily's former students. She pled guilty, took a deal. Her name erased from civic life. Her assets were seized, including a shattered drone labeled for Chief Harper with regret. Emily donated it to a school tech drive. Life moved on. Sidewalks bloomed with chalk art. Parks filled with laughter. The old HOA office became a public resource. Library.Emily declined to cut the ribbon, but a teenager she once stopped from getting fined for skateboarding handed her a card. "Thanks for proving one person can make a difference." A state bill, the Harper Act, was passed, mandating full HOA transparency and accountability at the block party on the anniversary of the chaos. Neighbors danced under string lights. Emily stood in the back, quiet as always. She didn't need a spotlight. She had earned something better: trust. And as she watched kids race barefoot through the grass, she whispered what she now believed. The best part wasn't Margaret losing. It was us winning each other. Call to action. What would you do if your HOA tried to frame you? Like if you believe in standing your ground. Share this story to expose HOA corruption and support community heroes. Subscribe to My HOA Life for more true tales of power, defiance, and justice in the suburbs.